Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Olympus Wealth Strategies podcast. I'm your host, John Sidery, where we help you take your finances to great heights. I've got very special guests who traveled in town to be with us today, Mr. Al and Leslie Rutherford, wonderful friends and very accomplished individuals in the business space, and looking forward to having them share their insights with us today. So, Al and Leslie, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us, and we're also clients.
Yeah, wonderful friends, clients. We have a beautiful relationship.
Yes, indeed.
So maybe can you all share with the audience a little about yourselves?
Absolutely. Well, I'm a native of North Little Rock, Arkansas. Graduated from a high school that doesn't exist actually anymore, North Little Rock Northeast, and went on to SMU and started my career in hospitality after I graduated. And down the road a little bit, I had the opportunity to meet this lovely lady. We were actually looking at a piece of business in Orlando, Florida, at the Orlando Convention Center. She was my counterpart, and we actually kind of butted heads, I would say, initially. But everything worked out, and she is now my lovely partner. Well, she was my business partner and is my lovely wife as well. So,
Life
Leslie,
partner.
Yes,
please.
Leslie, I was born in Oklahoma City. Lived there a number of years, then moved to Orlando, Florida. I went to school, Penn State. We are Penn State. And came back to Orlando and, of course, met Mr. Rutherford and had an opportunity about a decade later to move to Dallas and help him with the firm.
Well, you all have accomplished a lot, so let's dive into it because I think the audience is really going to want to hear about your story and journey of really your career because it's a very storied one, but also the business that you grew and ultimately exited from. And so, Al, for the audience that doesn't know who you are, can we talk a little bit about your time while you served in the White House?
Sure.
And how did you first get involved with the Clinton administration? And what was your role within the White House?
Okay, absolutely. Glad to talk about that. Well, growing up in North Little Rock, growing up in Arkansas, I think everyone knew at some point Bill Clinton was going to run for president. And so I stayed in contact with a lot of my friends here in Arkansas that were on staff and part of that kind of Clinton orbit. And so I actually worked on the campaign in Dallas in 92, and I was producing an event in Chicago for a client. And at that time, one of our speakers was a dear lady named Alexis Herman. And Alexis Herman was the director of public liaison for the White House. And she had come to be a part of the program, and we were talking, and I was her chaperone, so to speak, making sure she was in the right place at the right time, part of my role. And we began talking, and she was just mentioning that, hey, there's some opportunities for a guy like you at the White House. Would you be interested? And I said, well, certainly, I surely would. And so she put me in contact with the White House Office of Scheduling in Advance. And I was in Washington for another event and went over to the White House and met with several players there. And they said, well, we'd like for you to go out on the road for us. And I said, well, I'd be very interested. And they said, well, we got to do this backgrounding and all that. But where would you be interested in going? And so I picked Miami. And so Miami was the first site that I did for the president. It was a fundraiser, and I was what was called the site advance. So I was responsible for making sure that everything at that event site went according to the schedule we were to execute. And so learned the advance operation over that time frame and ultimately became what's called a lead advance.
He did a phenomenal job.
Well, and I when you're describing that, I'm just thinking the amount of time, preparation, and logistics involved had to be, especially when it's for the President of the United States, probably pretty stressful.
Yes, I say so. But
there is a bit of stress involved, no doubt about it. But I always tell folks, if you didn't love what you were doing, this is not the right place for you. And I will tell you, my parents were involved in politics when I was younger, and so it was kind of in my blood. My mom served under both Governor Bumpers and Governor Pryor at the time in various appointed roles, and my father was more of a kind of a grassroots guy working on campaigns. And I can remember working and stuffing envelopes with my dad for a candidate named Sam Sparks, who was running for the Arkansas State Senate back in the 70s. And so it was kind of in my blood, so I enjoyed it. But yeah, there's a little bit of stress. And as you ascend in the hierarchy of the organization, the stress increases, but also the sense of accomplishment does as well. Because I went from a site advance, being responsible for the event site that the president was going to lead advance, which is responsible for the overall trip, each of the sites. And you're there to brief the president on what he is about to do and answer any questions he might have. And then I also had the opportunity, and that was a unique experience, to serve as his trip director, because that actually puts you on Air Force One and you're dealing with all of the issues and challenges that are inherent in presidential travel. So I was either leading our teams as the associate director of presidential advance or on the plane as acting as the president's trip director. So it was a great 7 years, I will tell you that.
I will also say this. I didn't know him back then, but he always does everything with excellence. He also did pray, and I think you said, what, when your first trip?
The first time that I served as trip director was on a trip from Andrews Air Force Base, Washington, D.C., to Arkansas. And I remember praying before I got on the plane. I said, Lord, please don't let my first trip be my last trip. And so, because I could not have imagined how many things were going to happen on that trip that were just unscripted, and you had to deal with it.
Yes.
We had taken off from Andrews, and the military aide came to me and said, "You're going to have to make a weather call on our arrival pretty soon." And the situation was, we were scheduled to fly into Hope, Arkansas, but there were storms all through the area, through the region there. And if we were going to not land in Hope, we needed to give the Secret Service and all of the supporting teams an opportunity to reposition to Texarkana. But a huge arrival ceremony had been planned for Hope, Arkansas. And so I talked to the Air Force One pilot, and there's a weather genius at Andrews, and I don't even know if he's still there. It's 20 plus years later. His name was Mr. Z, and Mr. Z could forecast to the millisecond on what's going to happen with the weather, and Colonel Donnelly, who was the president's primary pilot. I got the word from Mr. Z that he thought the weather was going to clear. And Colonel Donnelly told me, he said, "Al, if we need to, we can circle a little bit and get in and get you there." And I talked to the traveling chief of staff, and I said, it's our thinking that we'll be able to land. He said, "Well, let's go for it." And so surely enough, clouds break. We're able to land. We do the Hope high school band was there, because you have to remember the president played sax, was in the Hope high school band, so this was a big deal. So they welcomed and wonderful ceremony. They were able to do that, and then the downpour comes, and we're out there, we're getting wet. President's dry, of course, but we're pretty damp, and then we head over to, because we were there to dedicate the president's boyhood home. And the rain is coming down. There's some sod in the backyard where the podium is, and it's floating up. It's just raining cats and dogs, man. And I get a call from the lead in Texarkana, because that's where we're supposed to go next and do a fundraiser. And he says, Al, I got some bad news for you. And you never want to hear that from the guy where you're getting ready to go to. I said, well, what's going on? Tell me about it. And so he said, the tent where we were going to do the fundraiser tonight has fallen in because it was an outdoor event. The ground's too wet. And so my immediate question to him was, well, do you have a backup plan? And he said, yeah, we can move the event and it's going to be fine. And I said, well, have you checked it with the Secret Service? Are they good? And he said, yeah, they're good as well. And so I said, well, execute on your backup plan and we'll see you in a couple of hours.
First event. How about that? I think you did
Yes.
well.
Thank you so much.
You made it on.
We made it. We got to Texarkana, finally got an opportunity to put some dry clothes on. That's always a good thing. And then we do the event, and the president says to me, as we were wrapping up, I know we were supposed to stay overnight in Little Rock tomorrow night, but let's go on back to Washington after we finish that event in Little Rock. So we flew from Texarkana to Little Rock, did an event for, I believe it was Governor, at that time, Senator Pryor. And we had about 2,000 people for this dinner, and the president naturally shook the hands of everyone in the room. And the military aide came to me and said, well, hey, we're getting pretty close to crew rest time here. We need to, see if we can get the president on out of here. And I said, listen, he is going to shake every hand in this place. He is not going to rush out of here. So you're going to have to figure out how we're going to get back to Washington tonight. And he said, I hear you. I got you. We'll be fine. And so we got the president out about 11:30, and we got back into Washington around 2:30 in the morning. And that was the culmination of the first trip. So,
well, talking about the first trip, I love the story that you've shared before, and that is your first phone call on Air Force One.
Yes.
Can you share that with the listeners?
Sure. I was very, very fortunate. After the G8 summit that took place in Lyon, my team and I were in Paris, and one of the team guys said, "Hey, I think we might have a seat for you on the plane going back." And I said, "Well, I'm good for that. That'll be fine." And so once we took off, which was phenomenal because I was still standing up, and there's nobody comes over and says, "Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to take off and fasten your seatbelts." And a buddy of mine and I were talking. He said, this is one of the best parts. He said, you see how smooth this is? We're actually about to start heading down the runway. And I said, well, okay, I probably need to take a seat now. And we sit down, we get into the air, and one of the guys says, hey, you can make a call if you want to. And I said, well, sure. And I said, well, I would love to call my mother. And the operator asked for the number and what is her name, and he got my mother on the phone and rang me back at the seat. And he said, Mrs. Rutherford, Al Rutherford is on the phone. Please feel free to go ahead. And so we have these push-to-talk phones on the plane. And I said, hey, Mom, just want to give you a call. Your son is heading back, and this is what it's like to be on Air Force One. And so she just thought that was a really, really cool thing.
That'd
really
be such
moment.
a proud moment for both of you, knowing that your mother was involved in politics, your father also the same.
Absolutely.
And here it is, her son is calling her from Air Force One.
Yeah. It was a very unique experience, and I couldn't help but think about my father, who had served in World War II. And obviously, his experience in being in Europe was much, much different than mine was. And I was just thinking about how far we had come in a generation. And so it was a blessing. The 7 years, while yes, stressful, was absolutely a phenomenal blessing. And I always tell people, look, if you got to go around the world, going around the world with the president and being on Air Force One is a pretty good way to do it.
That's not a bad way to travel.
Right.
Not a bad way to travel.
Well, talking about those 7 years, what are maybe some of the biggest lessons that you learned during that time from site to lead advisor and serving within the White House and all the talented people that were around you and on your team? What are maybe some of the biggest takeaways that you learned?
Well, I would say the attention to detail that is required is so important, and I carried that from the White House into our business. But it is you just can't leave anything to chance. And a good friend of mine always says the devil is in the details, and that is so true. I am not the most patient person in the world. Hard to believe, yeah. But I do think I probably leverage that and use that not being patient to my advantage, because I had a sense of urgency about what needed to happen. And that sense of urgency on projects was appreciated by clients, and the level of detail that we brought to an event was also very much appreciated. And the philosophy of there's always something else we can do. We're just not going to we're not going to quit. We are, as we said at the White House, we're going to figure it out.
And I think also just being around Al all these years, one of the things that he took away from the White House is, failure is not an option. That's another one. Failure is not an option. Don't give up. Keep trying. Like you said, figure it out. There's got to be another way. Let's rethink it. Let's retool it, rework it, do a workaround. But somehow we're going to end up winning.
Absolutely.
And I feel like, Leslie, that's such a good point, because whether it be from podcasts or books or different things, even movies, and the underlying theme is success is just around the corner, right? And so many people don't obtain what they set out to accomplish simply because they gave up too early, not because they couldn't have achieved it.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's the part too. Our faith also plays a large role, knowing that you can call on the higher power, and also ask for wisdom and knowledge, and it will be given to you. And so a lot of times it's like, how do we rethink this? How do we work through this? Reimagine, as they say, a different way to approach it. And so I think that's what's been wonderful about working with Al all those years. And then, of course, being here is always, he has an idea about how we can make this work. And I think you took that from the White House, because you really don't want to tell the president, it's not going to work out. Don't know what to tell you. And think that's going to work out well for you.
That would be the first and last flight.
Yeah, that would be.
So I think that's really part of it. And he has a wonderful way of energizing the team when we had the team together.
Well, maybe let's talk about that. So you're 7 years serving in government, and then ultimately transitioning to start your own company, Rutherford Associates. Can you maybe talk about that transition period?
Sure. Well, let me back up, because the firm actually ramped up in 1990, and I began my career with Lowe's Hotels in operations. Enjoyed it. Got recruited over to the Dallas Convention Bureau, sold the city of Dallas as a convention destination, then got recruited by Marriott, and the idea was that I would become a general manager. And I was talking to a meeting planner. The property that I was at was a little smaller, and I had come up with some creative ways to manage their event. And she said, have you ever thought about event management? And I said, no, I'm working on getting my own hotel. That's my goal. And she said, well, it's something you should think about. And I continued through dinner, and then a couple of weeks later called and asked, had we earned your business? And she said, yes, we're coming to your hotel. And that's when I asked her, I said, well, were you serious or were you just joking about this event management opportunity? She said, no, I'm serious. And I said, well, how many events would you do of this size? And she said, 4 or 5. And so I ran the numbers on my salary as a potential GM and this entrepreneurial path. And I come from an entrepreneurial background. Several family members were very entrepreneurial. And I said, man, these numbers look like something I need to give a shot, give it a try. And so it was in 1990 that I actually went out on my own and was producing events, kind of as a solo practitioner. And I made all the mistakes that you typically make as a first-time business owner in the first couple of years, but I survived. And I remember one event that we were doing for Procter & Gamble that I started on that at about 3 a.m. One morning, and it had a meet and greet component of getting all of their attendees from the airport to the hotel. And I wound up working, I probably got back to the house around 4 a.m. the next morning. And I had worked like 25 hours straight, and I loved it. It was energizing, and I said, yeah, this is it. I'm working 25 hours, but I'm working for myself.
Yep.
And I absolutely love it.
Not being told what to do, but doing it because
this is what
I
needs
feel
to
passionate
happen.
about.
Yeah. Absolutely. And so during that time, while my business was getting off the ground, I was, hiring an independent contractor, but, still primarily solo practitioner. And then the opportunity with the White House came along. And so I was continuing to build the business while working with the White House. Ultimately, I did take a full-time position with the White House as Associate Director of Presidential Advance. And when the president left, January 20th, 2001, it afforded me the opportunity to go full throttle in building out what we now know as Rutherford and Associates. And I believe it was because of the experience, the contacts, the relationships that I made over that time frame, because clients tend to have a level of comfort when they know that the guy who is working with them planned and executed events for the President of the United States
at the highest level
around the globe.
Yeah.
And so that gave us a level of credibility.
Correct.
That allowed us to really power this thing up, hit the throttle, and I began growing the business, bringing clients in, and it wasn't too long into that I realized that my value was not in the doing, but in the getting. And so I needed to have a person that I could trust to fulfill on the service side. And
a lot of entrepreneurs, Al, have a tough time letting go, because a lot of them that we talk to or have on the podcast say it's hard to truly make that first, what you call trusted hire, because the only person who's ever run this whole operation is me. Yeah. And the only person who's going to care about it as much as me is me.
Yes.
And so was that hard to make that hire to free up your time for your best use of talent?
It is probably the single most difficult and biggest decision that you will make as an entrepreneur, other than deciding to launch your company, is the first hire. And I'm very, very fortunate because Leslie was that first hire. And what I saw in her was a dedication to detail, a tremendous work ethic, a person who was just dedicated to excellence. And with that, I felt much more comfortable about putting the service side in her hands and that's the thing, if you as an entrepreneur are not comfortable with that hire, then that's not the right hire. I remember I was at a conference and Dave Stewart, who is the CEO of Worldwide Technologies, made the statement that you hire slow and fire fast. And
Yes.
he's really saying that you need to take your time and make sure that there is a right fit. Don't rush into something.
Right.
But at some point, you do have to pull the trigger if you're going to be able to grow, because there are only 24 hours in a day and you can only do so much. You have to rely on others if you're going to scale this thing to its potential. So it's a challenge, but you've got to find that trusted person, and it makes sense to take your time to do that.
Well, and talking about starting to scale Rutherford and Associates, you all managed events for companies that range from, several hundred attendees to tens of thousands attendees all over the country. Do you have maybe a most complex or memorable event that you can share with us?
You want me to take that one, or you want to do that one?
You can take it. I'll chime in.
I would say yes. And it's funny, but sometimes some of the larger events are not the most difficult to execute. Sometimes it is actually the smaller events that require, and when I talk about smaller, I'm talking less than 1,000 people, because as you said, we were experienced in managing, 5, 10, 15, 20,000 person events. But it is sometimes the smaller events that require a greater degree of hand-holding and client comforting. And so while it may look simple on the program sheet, or the run of show, as we call it, it can be very intricate and complex, because you're also dealing with personalities, with egos, and that's a big part, or that was a big part of what we had to do. And in those smaller events, people tend to be even more emotionally invested in them and are having difficulty letting go. And so you have to not only be the event planner, but sometimes you have to be the priest, and sometimes you have to
the therapist,
be the counselor, and you have to be the therapist, because, as I said, the event is relatively easy. We could do events in our sleep. We knew, the hotel piece of it. We knew the ground transportation piece of it. We knew the audiovisual piece of it. It is the personalities. It is the egos. It is the competing agendas that make it tricky. And that's where, we were able to negotiate and navigate tricky situations and events. And see, I've been able to tell you a story and not relate to you the specific client that I'm referring to.
Well, and it probably was always something you had to remind clients. I would imagine that anything that we have talked about on the run of show, nobody really knows what that was supposed to be. So it could be perfectly imperfect, and nobody knows any better.
Absolutely.
And I will tell you, this is a little story, and it's a personal story since we've been married. But you always still plan events, even when you're not doing an event. And so I think you probably know, we were going to Orlando for a couple of things. One, for scholarship for my mother who's passed, and also my dear friend was getting married at her house on the lake, about 50 people. And of course, Al and I were going to go. And when you're in meeting planning, you always still help out, kind of thing. And so I was there to just kind of help out and look pretty, take pictures, and be there for my dear friend. And I went to her, her suite in her room, and she's like, yeah. And she's like, yeah. And I was like, yes. And she says, is the minister here yet? And I was like, oh, no, he's not, or she's not, but, it'll be fine. And she said, yeah, it'll be fine. And so more time passed, and she's like, is the minister here? And I was like, no. And so I just quietly said, can I get to your computer? And she's like, sure. And so I said, all righty, we're going to go ahead and see how we can officiate a wedding. So I found the printer. I got a 3-hole punch. But the best thing was, I said, honey, here's this binder.
Yes. Yes.
And we're probably going to be looking for you to officiate the wedding.
Yes.
Because she had her family and her friends there. And so on the lake, I have it videotaped and everything. Al is there. Now, is he efficient? No. Has he ever done this? No. But he is doing it with the love and care of it all. And no one knew except her sisters and her husband that he was not the person.
Now that's a big role to step into.
Yes.
Expecting.
Yes. I was not expecting to marry anyone that day. I can assure you of that.
He did a wonderful job and everything.
But that's what we do. We step in, man.
Because the show must go on. What were you going to say? Oh, we're not going to have a wedding today. The minister got mixed up on the date and time. So thanks everyone for coming. No.
The show must go on.
The show must go on, and so it did. And that was just a couple of years ago.
That's right. Absolutely.
Well, talking about maybe that story, but also the experience throughout your two's career and building up Rutherford Associates to what it was ultimately known for. Would you say event planning is more, I know it blends both, but is it more about logistics or maybe more so about storytelling?
Oh, I would say it's about telling a story.
And I would say logistics, so there you go.
Well, and it mixes both. But when a client is doing an event, they're doing it with the idea of carrying a message. And I always try to explain that an event is simply a vehicle by which you promote a message. And if it goes well or if it goes badly from a logistical standpoint, that either lessens the brand or it enhances the brand. But events, by and large, are there to move some type of message. If it is, for example, if we're doing a corporate sales meeting, well, what we want to do is get people excited about their success. And so we do an awards program, or we want to inform them about a new product that's coming, getting ready for a new product launch. It's all about some kind of message to the public, to the attendee. Behind the scenes, that's where the logistics, the details come into play. And so you have a marriage of the two. And without both of those working in synchronicity, you have failed on delivering what the client expected. And I always like to say that we can't be successful if the client isn't successful. It doesn't matter if everything worked beautifully behind the scenes. If they weren't able to convey the message that they were trying to get out, then they won't view this successfully.
That's well said. And I never thought of it that way. The event is merely the vehicle, and you're either going to enhance or dampen what ultimately you're trying to do. But it seems it makes perfect sense as to why you both gave a different answer there, right? Sure. Hey, here's the vision of what we have to execute. And then, Leslie being with her talents on the back end, knowing here is everything we have to do to ultimately make that a enhancement.
A reality. Yeah. Absolutely. And she was phenomenal at leading our...
Thank you.
Oh, absolutely. It's no doubt in my mind, she was absolutely integral in leading and developing teams, because we were doing a volume of events that I could not be at everyone. She could not be at everyone. And that is why the structure that she put in place with account executives, conference managers, conference coordinators, matching skills to clients, but still maintaining that overall responsibility for execution. And I said early on, I said, what we need you to do is to train other Leslies. And she was particularly adept at that identification of talent and then the education and the training of those team members. So that makes all the difference in the world.
And I would also say too, just for general use, you also have to reimagine the people you hire and what you hire them for. So because we did a lot of events on the road, oftentimes we weren't in the office. When we were in the office, we had administrative assistants, and they took care of the planning. And then what we would do is we would have our core planners go on site, and we would hire temporary staff to help fulfill some of the more basic needs of the event. But you didn't know who those people were. And any state or city would be different in their level of customer service and their talent. But so I was like, wait a minute. While we were away, our administrative assistants are sitting there basically just waiting for the phone to ring or see if they can do something for us remotely. So what we started to do was, let's retool this. Let's not have people in the office that won't travel. So we took the administrative assistant, the one who had been doing some of the practical work in the office, and they got to actually come on site to help.
I bet they were excited about that.
Yeah.
See their work, know what it means. And it also provided more buy-in, because it's not just you, just sitting out this little document and, I signed off on the BO. No, you're living the work that you put forward. And I think it added a lot of sense of pride, ownership, but also even more team, because we're not hearing about how the event was. We were there and we were a part of it. And so building that team spirit, that chemistry, that again, it takes thinking of outside the box. Why not? And you have to have the right people too.
Definitely.
Because if you were looking to stay at your desk and just not travel, that probably is not the right opportunity for you. So identifying the right people and making that transition, that was also, I think, very important to the growth and the success of the firm.
I agree. Scalability.
And that's a great point for everybody that listens, that's out there, that ultimately hires, whether they're a hiring manager or an owner of a business, is finding the right person, but ultimately allowing them to see really kind of down the line what their hard work does.
Yes.
And not just be siloed and, hey, this is your job, assemble this and then move it on.
Yeah.
No, you are an integral component.
Yes.
And we want to have you see the fruits of your labor.
Yes, absolutely.
And be bought in on that.
Yes, absolutely.
It's important that every member of the team see the big picture as well as their particular task or tactical expectation, and that, I think, is the responsibility of leadership, of that entrepreneur, to be able to communicate and share what the vision is, and then get that buy-in
Yes.
And where you don't have buy-in is where you've got to make that decision on, okay, this isn't probably the best fit or opportunity. And so we want to give you an opportunity to go on to something where you will feel passionate about it, where you will feel comfortable, because keeping someone on board just to keep them on board is not a good management practice. And I think what we see is that organizations fail because they allow mistakes to exist. And if you see something that is not right, you can try and correct, and hopefully correction will work. But if that is not the case, then it's best for both parties to seek different opportunities.
And
It's not personal. It's just business.
And I think the other part too is identifying it. And as you stay in business, you start to identify and see the signs or the red flags earlier. And so you are more able to respond quickly.
But ultimately knowing they have to be the right fit. And like you said earlier, right? Hire slow and fire fast. And if you catch those red flags early on, well, hey, maybe after some time, if it really isn't something that's working out, or it really truly isn't a passion of yours, which I feel like most people who show up to work should have some level of passion.
Yes.
Because we spend most of our days at the office. But if they don't have that for that role, it might be best to just seek other opportunities.
It is. Because ultimately that person is going to be much happier in a different environment. And you want to think about the well-being of the people that you are working with, and the well-being of those that you are acquainted with, but may not necessarily be a fit for your organization.
Yeah, definitely.
So kind of in that spirit, how would you, when this came up, approach crisis moments, kind of when inevitably something goes wrong during an event? How did you all handle that? Because I think a lot of people here, whether they are employees or business owners, something in their work or project or business inevitably goes wrong. And from a team here that has experience in event management at the highest level, inevitably a crisis moment comes up. And so could you share some wisdom on how you deal with that?
Absolutely. First thing I would say is listen, we're not doing brain surgery here.
Yeah.
Okay? So let's take a moment to breathe and think. Whatever has happened, we can work through it. It's my father used to have a saying, when you realize you are in a hole, the first thing you need to do is stop digging. Okay? So if it is maybe a matter of room pickup, we've not picked up a certain number of rooms, or we've gotten word that the speaker is not going to arrive, the flight has been delayed, or whatever it is, work the problem. Don't let the problem work you. There is an alternative. There is a solution, but quite often people get frustrated or excited and spend a lot of time spinning and not actually working the problem. So I always like to say, listen, let's take a moment. Let's take a breath. Let's tell the client it's going to be okay. We are working on it. And then huddle. We would huddle in a small group and say, okay, you have any ideas? Let's talk this. Let's talk this through. And ultimately, we'd come to a decision or a new path that works. And at that point, you engage the client and say, here's what we're thinking is the best pathway for a solution. Do you concur, or do you see something else? So that they are then buying into what we are proposing. And if they have a better idea, let's bring it forth. Let's talk about it, and let's figure out how we can make that work. But ultimately, the first rule that we always tried to follow was don't panic.
Yeah.
Don't panic. Think it through and work the problem.
And I would say definitely that is 100%. Al is on point because you have, I call quick crises, and then there's the slow burn. And Al was very good at identifying. And that first point about making sure that you give your clients the reassurance, because that's what they have invested in, is no matter what, Rutherford Associates, they have the plan. So we're going to trust them. And it calmed them. And then we worked it on the backside of it. And the part that made the clients just stick with us and always, actually, a lot of business came through referrals from clients, is that once they identified the problem, if they saw it and they relate it to us, then we handle it. But the other way was then when they never knew there was a problem, they got to hear about it in the debrief, the by and by. And so I really, really admired Al because of his steadfast, calm demeanor. I remember on my first large program with him as the lead, there was almost everything could go wrong. In my mind did. And I was a little at the end because I believe in excellence. And I believe if you do all of these things and you think about the plan A to plan Z and it doesn't work out, I am disappointed, not pleased. And so I remember, because he used the word huddle, I was feeling really bad about the event. Now, the client thought it went well. Great. But I knew that there's things that I just would love to, as they say, as a quarterback, you would love to pull that pass back. But at the end, he said, "You're my quarterback. It's right. One game.
I'm with you.
It'll be better." And so that little pep talk, really inspired me and really said that he believed in me. And so, of course, I was able to move forward. And of course, I wanted to work with that client again. And I wanted to execute at the level that I knew we were capable of executing. And of course, we did. We kept them for, up until then, like 13 years. So.
Wow. Well, Leslie, you brought up a great point as far as, on the debrief, maybe telling people and your clients, hey, this is what we had to manage through. But also being proactive in communication, letting them know, hey, here is actually a situation that has arisen. Here is our best ideas. How would you like to move forward? Mm-hmm. And so you all worked with some of the leading CEOs yes. in corporate America, mm-hmm. In major organizations. So can you share with us, what do leaders do differently when it comes to, and I would say really successful leaders that were kind of always on the cutting edge and had great businesses? What do they do differently when it comes to communication and presence?
I think they listen first. Instead of just rambling on, I think that real leadership is about listening and engaging and letting people understand that you hear them, that you care, and that you can then move the message, share the vision. That is, I think, what I have seen in being around leaders, successful corporate executives, high-level government officials. There are those who already have something in mind that they want to say, and they'll say it. That may be a good leader, but a great leader is the one who listens to his people, recognizes that he doesn't necessarily know everything about everything, and is willing to take advice and counsel and actually cares. It is the servant leader concept over the autocratic leader concept. That to me is what really differentiates or separates truly phenomenal business leaders, political leaders. If you can stop for a moment, listen, hear what people are saying, and then tailor your communication to meet that need and express what it is that you are ultimately looking to do, the ultimate goal, be it legislation or a better P&L. It is making sure that your people know that they are being heard and that they are valued.
And I would also say on the as far as the leader is making sure that you surround yourself with diverse, bright, respectful, talented, confident people who feel confident, as they say, speaking truth to power, who have maybe are versed in areas that you're not, and also being, as Al said, being willing to listen and take it all in, because I think that is where leadership can sometimes go awry, is really having your mindset so set that you're not willing to reverse and change course. And I think one of the things that we always found, or I always found about Al, that's been wonderful as a leader, is that he could say, we could be going down the wrong road, but it's never too late to turn around and go a different direction. And I think that takes a lot of courage. I think it takes a lot of confidence, and it takes a willingness to know that you're not intimidated by making an adjustment. A lot of times he would say, we're going this way, but with additional information, more data, that can change.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you really have to do, is be willing to adapt. When you get new information, it may promote what you're looking to do, or it may change what you need to do. And being able to take that in, evaluate it, and then also listen to wise counsel.
So would it be fair to say that the difference between good and great leaders, it seems like maybe kind of an overall character theme would be a sense of humbleness and humility to not only listen, but also recognize that everybody likes to be heard. Mm-hmm. And so if you surround yourself, like Leslie, you just mentioned, with a very diverse, bright group of individuals who can bring different perspectives in their own, talented areas, having that trust in your team, but also the humbleness and humility, even if you are, like you all ran a very successful business and grew a business, and a lot of entrepreneurs who were out there, they're go-getters, and they know, hey, if I can just have a lot of me's, we can, tackle the world. Mm-hmm. But having that humility to realize, maybe my team member or this data that's coming in is going to direct course, and I need to be trusting and humble and have some humility to know maybe what I thought I was going to say or do for the business needs to change.
Yeah, absolutely.
Spot on. You have to, as a leader, approach from a humble perspective. And one thing I think differentiates good from great is consistency. You can't do it once in a while. Yeah. It has to be the ethos of who you are in the organization, to remain humble, appreciative, recognizing your blessings, but to be consistent in that. Because if you're humble 20% of the time and arrogant 80%, well, you're going to be known as the arrogant guy.
Yeah.
Not the humble guy.
And there's also a difference between arrogant and confident. Mm-hmm. And so I would say that Al is humbly confident. So because sometimes I think the word humble is like, I barely know how to move. It's really.
You're not meek and mild if you're humble, right?
Yeah,
you can be very confident, but
it's just saying I'm approachable. You can speak to me. I can hear and listen, and still say, I believe I still have a good plan.
Yeah.
And that's the blend of it. And I think right now in this world, the word humble is getting a bad rap, but to truly be humble means that you don't put anyone above you and don't put anyone below you. You put yourself right where you are.
Yeah, that's very well said. I like that. Yeah. Sponsorships and revenue generation were a part of your firm's work.
Yes.
What advice would you give companies looking to maximize ROI or maybe that vision that they put forth for events and branding opportunities?
I'd say make sure you're aligned. If you're looking at an organization to invest in, to provide sponsorship, make sure you're really aligned with what the association or the entity is about, because when you are co-branding, there is, there's an opportunity for success, but there's also an opportunity for calamity if those brands are not actually equal and consistent. And I'm talking about in both image and in delivery, on expectation. So tread carefully as you look to invest. Make sure that there is a shared commonality on what ROI looks like. And I think it's always a good idea to test the ground with a short-term relationship or project before you enter into something that is long-term, to make sure that there is a good fit for both parties.
Yes.
Now, obviously, you all have shared a lot of valuable wisdom today, and we really appreciate you coming on. So I guess I'll leave you both with this question. Looking back on your careers and also in the business that you built, what advice would you give someone building a business today?
Well, one, to Leslie's point, stay humble.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that idea of humility is really a valuable one. It is relevant today, and it is a sensible approach. I would say next, don't quit. It's tough, but it's very rewarding to be an entrepreneur, to lead your own business. It has put us in a position where we are young enough to enjoy the fruits of our labors, and old enough to remember them.
Yeah.
So we just, are very appreciative. We recognize the blessings, and there will be many bumps along the way, but stick with it. If you were passionate enough to start it, you saw something that you wanted to go after. And when times get challenging, think back to what that was and draw that inner fire, bring that forward, because at the end of the day, winners do what losers won't. And you have to stay in the game if you're going to win the game.
Kind of like what you said, a little bit earlier, you can't be humble 20% of the time and 80% arrogant. You can't have the passion 20% of the time and lose it,
That's right.
The other part of the time. You have to be fully invested.
Absolutely. 100% of the time. Because I'll tell you, as an entrepreneur, there's always one more thing that you could be doing.
Yeah.
Always. I felt that way. It was just.
And I would say too, for those who are doing the business, I would begin with the end in mind. Like, I would have a vision of what I see my success would be. Mm-hmm. And I think you should be working towards that. And you should realize once you achieve that, Now, do you want to move forward? Do you want to continue on? But I think you want to be able to have, as we call, some wins along the way, some milestones to say, okay, I'm doing it. And you want to be able to know that you have accomplished something and that you're not on a, what's the one with the little,
What, a hamster wheel?
Hamster wheel. That you are really going somewhere. And so if you decide to, get to one stop and you reach the finish line and you want to keep on going, that's great. But start with a plan so that you can feel like you are accomplishing something.
Somebody told me this one time that the difference between a dream and a goal is simply writing it down.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Amen.
Mm-hmm. And that's great that you share that, because Leslie, I think a lot of people don't plan with the end in mind, but very great that you pointed out you need to have some success milestones along the way to celebrate, because that's a long road to get to where you want to eventually be.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And the other thing, I think that's great, but the other thing I would say is, along the way, are you having fun?
Yeah.
Or is it still, you got into this for a reason. You had a passion. You were excited about it, and there had to be some fun along the way, especially at the beginning. Is that still the case? Check and see, and then if that's not, then what changes do you need to make in order to bring that business back so that it is in fact that passionate goal that you had in mind when you first began?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's well said. Well, cool. Alan, Leslie, thank you so much for traveling in and being on this podcast. Really appreciate both of you. And well, hopefully that was a wonderful episode, a lot of great value shared, and we will see you on the next episode. Thank you.
All opinions expressed on the podcast by the host and guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of Olympus Wealth Strategies or Uptick Partners, a registered investment advisor. This podcast is for educational purposes only and is not legal advice and should not be relied upon as a basis for any decisions. The investments discussed on this podcast may not be suitable for all investors and involve risks that should be carefully considered. Listeners are encouraged to consult with a qualified financial advisor before making any investment decisions. Certain investments may require specific investor qualifications, which not all individuals may meet. Any funds or companies discussed are not a recommendation or endorsement. Guests in the podcast might be actual clients, but are not compensated to be on the show, and their experiences are not representative of all relationships, which might differ substantially.